Hello and welcome back. This is Grillenheimer. At this time, I have an unusual story that I'm actually going to tell. I'm normally not a very good storyteller, but let's get into this. If you've been on this channel for any length of time, especially in the last 2 years, now this channel started about 9 years ago, around 2013, as Gamers Need Christ. And this was nothing but big old me in front of a TV and trying to explain the Bible, and very badly I did at that. Those videos are still out there, but I wouldn't suggest them. But now, okay, this is a story about the lake house. Okay, if you have been here since 2020 because of the Transformers, the TCG, you will remember I had a section called Marina Wars. And the boats that I began to turn into Transformers were boats my family owned. A boat that maybe my uncle had, my grandfather's boat, my dad's boat, and we went through many boats. We would have a motorboat, he would sell it, he would get us something different. He would sell that boat, he would get a sailboat, we'd have fun with that for a while. He'd sell it and get a bigger sailboat. Sell that one and get a bigger sailboat. I had an aunt and uncle, they had a catamaran, etc., etc. So that's where all those characters came from. These were based off real boats that my family had at some point or one another while we had this lake house. We were not a church-going family. We were a God-fearing family. But we didn't go to church. We went to this lake house up in, I'll just say east of Alabama, and without exactly pinpointing where this is. And so this is where this story is taking place, is at this lake house. So the house was built in the early 70s. My family built it. I was there as a baby. I have no recollection really, except for a few pictures they took while the property was being built and being cleared out. My grandparents owned that lot the house was built on. My parents owned the lot over. My aunt and uncle owned the next lot over. It is still a fairly undeveloped area for the most part. There's more houses there now than there were when we owned it. After my grandfather passed away in 03, the house sold within the year before my firstborn was even brought into this world. So my kids never got to know about this lake house. But let's go back to about 1997, before I had kids, before I got married, during my first career. And earlier, before then, I had established going up there on the spring break with a good friend of mine who was also a relative by marriage. And we'd go up there every spring and go fishing. We were not quite old enough to drive, so my grandparents would drive us up there. So there'd be just the four of us, and we had this tradition established, and we went up there a few years in a row every spring break, and we'd go crappie fishing. Okay, so well then, after we grew up, we kind of went our separate ways. My grandmother passed about 93, 94, and my grandfather would let me go. I would call and let him know, hey, can I go to the lake house? Yeah, fine. Is there anything you need me to do? Yeah, do this. Make sure you turn the water on and make sure you turn the water off before you leave, etc., etc. So in this one spring break, I was up there all by myself. Okay, and I went up there. I would go fishing. I would just hang out. I would take a Sega Genesis up there for the old TVs that, I could play the Sega Genesis up there somewhere different. And when it got dark, it got kind of creepy because it was still pretty isolated back then. It's not quite as isolated now, but it still is. And then before I can explain this story, I'm going to have to explain the layout of the house and the driveway and the property. So let's get into it. So when you're on the main road, and this all used to be gravel before they eventually paved it. It's sometime in the mid to late 80s. And it was all gravel. If somebody was driving around up there, you could hear it from the other side of the sluice. So this is not exactly on the water. It's on the water, but it's not on the lake. It's secluded inside the slough, surrounded by trees. If If you look at it from a satellite, you don't see the house. Note that. So, you got the road comes in, and it's pretty high, and there's a nice drop off. Well, right as you get to the driveway, and it used to be a dead end, it isn't anymore, and you would have to go down a fairly steep incline, which is the driveway, and it eventually comes down and levels out next to the house. Well, the house is on the right side of the street, and right as it levels out, the house is there, and with a wooden stairwell going up, which comes up and goes around the front of the top floor. It's just a two level house, an unfinished bottom basement, and the top level is where you would live, and you got 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. The whole kitchen, dining room, and den were all open. There were no walls up there on the front half of the house. With 2, golly, I'm really putting this on the map, because if you know anything about this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. 2 huge glass sliding doors that go out onto the that wooden balcony, like I said, that comes back around up to that front door that we rarely used, and the stairs going down to the driveway, which is a steep incline to get back out. Okay. So it's spring break. I'm up there and I'm fishing and having fun and watching out for snakes and being cautious and everything. We didn't have cell phones back then. We didn't have the internet. Well, we did, but not up at the house. And this house had no air. It was heat. It had heat, but no air. And it did have a chimney. So I'm up there, and it's at night, and I've been playing the Sega Genesis. I've been watching a little TV. I had a whole 4 channels I could choose from even back then, because there's no cable up there. There's nothing. Okay, you joke about being off the grid nowadays. I guess, I mean, you could kind of say that was off the grid, but it had power, it had water, it had gas, etc., etc. Well, I'm asleep. Some loud noise wakes me up in the middle of the night on one spring break in around 1997. Or no, maybe 1998, 99. Because I was working. That was my first career. Yeah, it had to be 96, 97. Yeah, I was right the first time. So, I mean, I know the date's immaterial, but give you a sense of what's going on. There's no phone at this house, no cable at this house. We had TV with an antenna. That's it. And I didn't have a phone. So I wake up. I have no idea what time it is. And this was not a dream. I still remember this vividly. I tried recording this a second ago. It was like I relived the whole thing. This is the most scared I have ever been. Of course, this was about, 25 years ago? So I was still a young man, or younger. So I wake up. There's this loud noise right on the other side of the wall, because my bedroom is one of the 2 rooms on the left side of the house, right next to the driveway. There's a window above my head where the bed is, and the end of the bed, I'm looking out at a door which is wide open to the hallway. And I'm like, what is this noise? Where's this light coming from? This blinding light. It was casting it into the hallway, which made the hallway look like cardboard. Everything just looked very flat. And I was expecting someone or something to walk down the hallway and look at me. And I'm thinking, everything's locked up. If somebody was banging on the door or the window, I would have heard it. I would have known. And I'm a heavy sleeper. So something like a jet airplane is on the other side of the door. On the other side of the wall. And like, again, I'm on the top floor, not the bottom floor. And there is a window above my head, How did I describe this property? I failed to fully describe it. Steep hill for the driveway, comes alongside the house, go on the left side of the house, and then turns into a big circle. And the circle does this, goes down to the water, and there's a boat ramp, and there's 3 piers. Okay? The one main pier is for this property. The other 2 are for the other properties. That was my parents', and the other one was for my aunt and uncle. Well, there's no way. And I kept thinking, who's up here this late at night? Who would come up here this late at night and shine their light through this window? And then it hit me. How is light shining through this window? Because on the other side of this window are woods, not a road. And to be off the driveway, to come down there, for any light to come that was coming straight through this window to cast light and shadow into the hallway made no sense. And at the same time, I'm thinking, and all this happened within seconds. This is going through my head. I'm wide awake. I'm scared to death because I'm thinking there's somebody here. And I didn't want to move. It's almost like I couldn't move. And I'm listening very intently, and I'm thinking, this is not the sound of a car engine. This sounds like a jet airplane next to the house. Now, a long time ago in the 70s, early 80s, there is some sort of a prison system somewhere around that lake, and we had seen before where somebody had escaped, and they would, you'd see a helicopter and they find them and get them. But normally it was during the day. Some strange things would happen at night, but not quite like this. And then there's a couple of details here that just didn't add up. This was not the sound of rotor blades of a helicopter. Because I'm thinking the only thing that could hover like this over or beside the house would be a helicopter. And then how's this bright light shining above my head straight through this window? That's not how the driveway works. Why does it sound like a jet airplane? And why does it sound like it's right next on the other side of the wall where I'm sleeping? And I was a big Star Trek fan, and I felt like the idea popped into my head seeing this light. And it was like LED light. We didn't really have LED kind of strength of this magnitude, unless it was the police of some sort, streaming through the window. Then I was afraid to move. And it felt like the house was being scanned. Now, this is going to sound very silly because I know it's Star Trek, blah, blah, blah. I was a big fan of The Next Generation. But I really felt like the house was being scanned. I felt like if I move, whoever's on the other side of this wall is going to know. If I speak, whoever's on the other side of this wall is going to know. If I breathe, whatever's on the other side of this wall is going to know. I continued to try holding my breath and breathe as shallow as I could for minutes. It felt like forever. Never been that scared in my life. I was half expecting something to come walking down the hallway and to look straight at me from the end of the bed. I'll never forget this broadening feeling that I was being looked at somehow, some way, for some reason. It was frightening, it was scary, And again, I was afraid to breathe. And it was almost like there was a light going down through the window. And I'm thinking, there's no way a car can do this. From the angle of this window to the driveway that's right next to the house, if the side of the house is right here, you got the driveway coming down like this. It was actually steep back here, nowhere near the house. It leveled out by the house. And when it left within seconds. And another thing about this detail that I almost forgot to mention, if it was that close to the house and that other side of the wall from where I was sleeping, whatever was there was below the tree line. No helicopter pilot in their right mind would hover that close to a house and somewhere that's residential, no matter how remote, or be below that close to the trees. Fortunately, I did fail to check the leaves before I left that lake house that weekend. I remember telling my wife some of this, my story, and what I experienced, and I was like, I have never been that scared in my whole life. So I felt like if I moved, if I spoke, if I even breathed, they would know. And I don't know how I knew they would know. So I laid there on my back, trying not to breathe what felt like 30 minutes. And when it left, it was like this jet engine sound kind of went into like a gear or some sort, and it was gone. It was boom. It was, I sound so stupid. It was gone within seconds. There were no tires on the gravel. There were no tires on the road. There was no sounds of rotor blades on a helicopter. I've never been that scared in my life. I thought I even remember possibly hearing someone walking on the porch, the wooden porch out front too, even though I wasn't exactly sure. It was almost like it was being raided, but by who? Why? Only my car was in the was parked in the driveway, near on the round part of the driveway close to the house. Actually, it was under the porch. I always parked under the porch close to the house. If any of y'all experienced this, have any idea what that could have been, all I can think of is UFO. That's all I can think of, which is, I'll admit, grasping at straws. It wasn't a vehicle. It wasn't a helicopter. And to have light that bright coming through an upper window, which had to be coming from the sky somehow, from something below the tree line right next to the house. It still mystifies me to this day. One of the last times I did go to that house, I had to fight scorpions to get in through the basement door. And there were bugs all in the wash machine downstairs in the basement. And I just turned around and left. I wish I had stayed and tried to do my part and clean stuff up. I mean, I took care of the scorpions because now the house is no longer in my family. And it's a place I miss very much. Again, we didn't go to church. We went to that lake house. And my kids know nothing of it except for my rattling stories about it. So, have any of y'all experienced anything like this? Could it have been something out of this world? Could it have been some sort of drone? Or could it have been the police looking for somebody? None of it made sense. From the angle, from the physics of things, from the light, from the noise. The noise alone is what woke me up. This was not a dream. And it was 25 years ago. And I still remember this. Let me know back down below in the comments if you like this video. Hit the like button. We'll see you next time. And as always, thanks again. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. And God bless.